Right, so when we get to row 12, we're going to be ready to split the work, to start working backwards and forwards. Now let me just explain why. Up to this point on our lovely tea cosy, I've just opened it out that way, we've been working in the round. So you can see there's no join or anything, it's all just one continuous piece here. But now what we need to do is create the opening for the handle and for the spout. And to do that, obviously we need to have fresh air where it can go through. So when there is an opening like that, there's you know, an opening either side, we cannot work this piece in the round because there's gaps. So the piece between the opening, this section, will be worked backwards and forwards before we join again and go back to working in the round. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how to do that. So as I said, we do this on round or row 12, and to start with there is no change at all. You would just work the first 41 stitches, the first sort of repeat of the chart if you like. You work that in completely the same way. There isn't anything different or important that needs to happen. So I'm just on those last 4 stitches, which are the double ones, aren't they? Now, ordinarily, I would continue working, I'd pull my needle through and work these back stitches, but I am not going to do this time. I'm going to leave those stitches unworked on that cable, and I am going to just turn the work, okay, so that the reverse side is now facing me, and we have not seen this view yet, have we? So we've got that beautiful green there now, which is lovely, but all of a sudden we've just got to think a little bit differently because we've got some green facing us rather than some orange. Let me show you how you handle that. So we're still going to be working these first, well, they're 4 stitches, aren't they? But they're just 2 pairs. We're still going to be working those, holding our yarns together because we want to create this edging, this kind of little bit of reinforcement around the handle and the spout. So it's easy, I mean, follow the pattern obviously by all means, but the easiest thing I do is I look at what's gone before and I do the opposite. So I've got a purl stitch here, so I'm going to knit it. Okay, that is the pattern that we're hoping to achieve. Just I don't know the name of it, excuse me, I don't know the name of that. I need to look that up for you, where you kind of alter. Is it moss? Actually, I think it's moss stitch. I think it's moss stitch. So my first 2 pairs of stitches are dealt with both yarns held together. And now we are back to double knitting as we know and love it. So obviously on your pattern you've got some colour work, you've got some dots to take into consideration, but they will already be there, they will already be established. So all you're going to do is follow the pattern of what's there before, unless obviously you need to increase the size of your dots or whatever, but you'll know what I mean. If there is a dot appearing there, you're going to know you've got to use your contrast and not your main colour. But on this side we have now gone from having the zinnia as our knit colour or our main knit colour to having avocado as our main knit colour. And when I follow my chart, it's very complicated, where I see an orange square, I've actually got to knit it with the green, because in fact the orange is just representing this is what I'm knitting. Okay, so whatever's there already, the green is there and it's knit, so you'd know, wouldn't you? You wouldn't put a purl stitch in there, you'd know it was a green knit stitch. So that's what I'm doing, and there's no change. You've still got purl partners. Whenever you've knit, you've got a purl, and on this pattern, whenever you've knit in one colour, you're going to purl in the opposite. All right, and that is what's happening now. What is happening here as I've gone speeding off, I'm actually now on row 13. So every time I turn this work, I go up a row, because we aren't working all the way around anymore. We're not working 82 stitches all of a sudden, we're working 41. Okay, which means every time I get to these end of these stitches and turn the work, I have completed a row. All right, so it's very different to what we were doing previously. If you remember, we had to complete both needles worth of stitches to have completed a round, but now it's half the time because we're only doing half the work. And I will be working across the reverse side, because although it is a double-sided technique, so both sides are showing a nice knit side. We don't have any kind of reverse side at all. We're not seeing any purl bumps or anything like that. I am still in my head going to keep the notion that the green is the reverse side. Okay, and when I'm working a reverse side, I am reading the chart from left to right. Okay, I am reading the chart from left to right. This is the other big change that comes in here. Up until this point, we've been going round and round, reading that chart from right to left. As soon as you start working backwards and forwards, you've got to start reading your chart slightly differently. That will be, you know, that will be a good indicator is that all of a sudden your colour looks differently. Now, if your colour looks different, know that you're going to read your chart differently, okay?
Hello, just interrupting here to let you know that there's a lot more information about reading charts in the video called Reading Charts.
So I've worked back now across row 13, let's say, and when I get to the end, I'm going to turn again. Unfortunately, I've used this piece as a sample piece, so my ends are a little bit different. And I'm turning again. Okay, so now we're back to a side and a colour that we're familiar with. So I've now done rows 12 and 13, and I'm on 14. So when I'm looking at the right side again, I'm reading the chart from right to left again. So I hope that makes sense, sort of the going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. I'll do another little bit. It does grow much quicker because you're only kind of working on half the stitches that you've had to work on previously. And so you do need to remember you're moving up. Don't repeat each row twice because you're going to get very elongated spots and nobody wants that. But that's how you're working backwards and forwards. I rather like it because there's no extra purling or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's just you're knitting and purling in different colours. That's all that's happening there. So working flat is the same, you know, it's the same as if you're working a coaster or anything like that. You're just working backwards and forwards, and what will happen, your knit colour will change to what your purl colour was and vice versa. Okay, so that is how you split. Now, obviously, as you work these rows, and they do work quickly, particularly on my little sample piece here, which is half the size of the real one, one side is going to get a lot taller than the other side, and that is intentional. We want that to happen because when you've got to and completed row, I think it's 38, 39, I can't remember, you've got to stop and then go in and do the other one and bring that up to speed, but I'll show you how to do that when we get there. Right, when you've got to the point where you've completed, I think it's row 38, isn't it? But all the rows that you need to work backwards and forwards, and I've only done a few here, but you know, you get the general idea. You will obviously have only worked one half of it. So if I turn this over, you can see this side is considerably shorter and it needs to be absolutely the same size, obviously. So what you need to do is you now need to go and do what you've done on here on this side. So how to do so? Very easy. I've finished the last row that I needed to do, turned my work, and I'm just going to break those yarns, literally. There you go, that's done. Now on this piece, there's not too much of a difference in height, so I could probably kind of get away with leaving these stitches unworked on this cable if I wanted to. But on your real piece, there will be a quite considerable difference, and it won't really work keeping the stitches on the cable. So we need to move those stitches onto some waste yarn, and I'll just show you how to do that. I've got a little ball of cotton yarn here. If you have got any kind of cotton yarn, it's ideal because it's smooth And because the yarn we're working with is proper wool, it's sort of, if you look at it under a microscope, it's almost like barbed, so it clings. So if you put something clingy through, it gets quite tricky to take the waste yarn out. So smooth yarn is better if you've got it. So I'm just going to cut a small piece of that and thread my darning needle. As usual, easier said than done. There we go. Can you hear the flying? Today has been very, very stressful, viewer, in terms of the noise in the area, but there we go. Right, so I've got my yarn thread on this little needle, and all I'm going to do, you see, is put the needle. I'm going to do it like that because I'm also going to use that as a photograph in a minute. Put the needle through each stitch and probably do a few at a time if you want, but then just take them straight off the end of the knitting needle and do perhaps another couple, like so. Okay, and then just pull, and when you pull, that yarn, that waste yarn is holding those stitches nice and securely. They're not going to come undone because they're held sort of securely on that piece of yarn. Okay, so that's all you're going to do. You're going to go all the way along, just moving each stitch onto the needle. Okay, and then when you've got a few on there, pull through, and the stitches will just sit on the yarn. That's all you're going to do all the way along. Right, so I'm on the last few stitches, and I'm just going to put my needle straight through all of them. Take them all from the needle and pull that last bit through, and you can see they're all sort of held securely on that waste yarn. Now, providing you've made the yarn long enough, sort of, as long as the cable needles, you don't need to tie a knot or anything on there if you don't, because the stitches aren't going to fall off the ends, but you can if it makes you feel happy. That's absolutely fine. But what you've now got, you see, is you've now got access to working those unworked stitches. So you've got your worked stitches at the back on the waste yarn, and now it's clear, isn't it, that you've got to work these unworked stitches at the front to bring the level up to the same as this, so you can go back to joining in the round. So that's fine. All we need to do, you've also got to just join your two yarns again, because at the moment they're sort of over there floating freely, and we're going to start with a pearl on this one, but if it's a knit, it doesn't matter, it works in the same way. Obviously we start with those edge stitches which are holding the two yarns together, if you remember. So I've just got two yarns held together, and all I'm going to do is put a loop. Let me just show you on the camera. Can you see? Oh, this cable, honestly people, if I get to the end of this it will be a miracle. Right, so you can see I've just put a little loop around that needle, and I'm going to complete the first stitch, and off we go. Do not worry at all about those ends. I will show you at the end what to do with those. They will disappear completely. Okay, and I'm just working now in exactly the same way. So really all you're doing is repeating the instructions that we had when we first started working backwards and forwards, splitting the work. So you're off and flying again now, and working backwards and forwards, etc, etc. You've got all of that all that good information about how you achieve that. And when you've completed this side so it matches the other side, you will be ready to join back into the round, and obviously there's videos for those, and exciting times, chaps. Those videos from that point onwards use the actual real tea cozy and not this small sample. All right, so I'm off and working across just 21 stitches, exactly as we did the first half. We're just going to catch up by doing the second half.